I'm Jane Donawerth, Professor Emerita of the University of Maryland, speaking to you from Arizona. The title of my paper is Accessorizing Rhetoric in Suffrage Plays, Employing Collaborative Ethos, Amplification of the Commonplace Arguments of Suffrage and Anti-Suffrage Discourse, and Figures of Excess, Hyperbole, Sarcasm, Catalog, and Contradiction. American suffrage drama from 1883 to 1916 urged women to join the cause and men to vote for female suffrage. The rhetoric of this drama parallels the women's movement's rhetoric in lectures and pamphlets and the use of parlor rhetoric to organize women to serve as a transition to public arenas and to increase women's political agency. Wendy Scherer has argued that the rhetorical practices of suffrage rhetoric are based on collaborative, widespread persuasion. Women's rhetoric as collaborative is extended in suffrage drama to the portrayal of the suffragists. In Alice E. Ives' 1896 A Very New Woman, for example, a mother joins her son's fiancé, the new woman, to convince him to vote for women's suffrage. In Alice Thompson's 1912 A Suffragette Baby, 4 suffragists each secretly adopt the same child orphaned when her mother dies suddenly, and the play deploys collaborative ethos to debunk the anti-suffrage argument that women who vote would neglect their children for politics. In suffrage plays, arguments both for and against suffrage are amplified by figures of excess. In Mary Shaw's 1914 The Parrot Cage, the analogy of women's condition to slavery is represented materially and hyperbolically by actresses in cages. Thus, in Shaw's play, the parodic repetition of gender stereotypes displaces through hyperbole those very constructs, as Judith Butler argues in her theory. In Catherine Ma McCullough's 1911 Bridget's Sisters, a washerwoman supporting her family has her wages garnished for her husband's liquor tab, thus rendering the damage to women from lacking control of their own property hyperbolic. Mary Jenny Howe's 1913 An Anti-Suffrage Monologue is a catalog of arguments against women's voting, but arranged schematically in pairs of contradictions to satiric effect. Women would not use the vote if they had it, but if they had it, they would desert their families for politics. If women had the vote, they would vote the same as their husbands, or they would vote the opposite of their husbands. Women can't band together, but if they had the vote, they might, and start a sex war. The play is built around a catalog of paired arguments, amplified by the figures of parallelism, antithesis, and contradiction, that deflate anti-suffrage arguments to reveal their lack of logic, and inflate unstated pro-suffrage arguments simply by contrast. In the 19th century, both sides of the suffrage debate were represented as excessive in suffrage drama, and the plots moved toward moderation. Votes for women, but for womanly, family-oriented ones, as in Ella Cheever Thayer's 1883 Lords of Creation. On the other hand, in the 20th century, the anti-suffrage side is represented as excess, foolish and hypocritical, and sensible men and women together agitate for women's rights, as in Emily Sargent Lewis's 1912 Election Day. In arguments, in figures, in satire, suffrage drama plays up the excesses of rhetoric. Classical rhetoricians extol the pleasures that rhetorical excess provides, in witty use of wordplay and figures, in a heaping variety of argument, especially turning the opponent's claims against them, and an amplification, restatement in varying ways. A wonderful example of this pleasure in excess is Mary Shaw's The Women of It, or Our Friends the Anti-Suffragists, a satirical comedy from 1912. In this play, 3 female guests attend a meeting of an anti-suffrage club, where 6 members practice speaking to a legislative committee. Suffragists are out so much, one says, they don't recognize their own children. Men always want women to do the drudgery, explains another, so it's good that men have one thing, politics, that they are willing to do themselves. Women can't reason, they argue, but they are the moral center of the nation. The pledge of the club includes the promise to have as little brains as possible and not to use all you have. At the end of this display of hyperbolic claims and silly arguments, the guests recognize the illogic and become suffragists. The pleasure of the audience lies not only in the change, but also in appreciating the excess of the anti-suffragists' conclusions. Thank you. Stay safe.